For those of you who have not, again, like Marshall said, I've never had the chance to get to meet you before, my name is Khalid. I serve on staff with the Youth and Family Ministry and also with the Teen Ministry. And I'm super thankful that, again, I get a chance to share with you guys today because this whole idea that Marshall has been talking about as like the harvest season is really cool because I think this is a great opportunity for us to welcome our neighbors, to bring people out from our communities, and just talk about stuff that's harvest. I mean, when I think about, you think about the harvest, like Marshall said, it's really like a changing of the seasons, but in Florida, it's just windy and a little colder. That's about it, That's really the changing of the seasons for us. We don't get all the fall colors and stuff, but something else I always think about when I think of fall is you always think about pumpkins, and I asked Cambria to show a picture of Maisie because I was just like, what better way to show, lovely pumpkins than with a beautiful baby? But I think the other thing that sometimes I think about when I think of the harvest season is pumpkin spice lattes, which I will never drink. Just putting that out there. I don't like pumpkin spice, but it's not about me today. But I think especially for anyone in the room who may have any experience with farming, I think this season represents like a time of reaping your crops after all of the hard work that you have put in, sowing your seed into the ground. This is the chance for you to be able to harvest your crop. And today's lesson is sponsored by John Deere. No, I'm kidding. John Deere, if you're watching, we would love to invite you to church, but that's maybe not be the case. But it's a time to be able to reap all of the crop that you have sown over the year. And I'm actually something of a second-generation farmer. My dad actually majored in agricultural science. So he went to school and studied agriculture. And my parents are actually watching from St. Croix, and my family as well. They were super excited when they got to hear I was speaking. But my dad has so much experience with agriculture. I mean, he's been involved in it for off and on for almost 40 years. In St. Croix, I mean, he went to school studying it, came back to St. Croix, and has taught in the public school systems with agriculture. This is actually some pictures from the land that my dad owns with my family. This is him. This is actually a picture of our front yard. Like, this is actually our front yard. We walk out, and my dad has all of these crops and plants that are just grown. He tills the soil with so much stuff in his school, and this is a picture of one of the years that he got like a crop of harvest with some tomatoes, some eggplants, some spinach, and my mom doesn't have to go to shop for produce very much as a result. So if you ever want to save on some produce, start growing some stuff in your yard. But this whole idea of harvest means a lot to me from growing up in this experience. And I think that it means a lot to God as well because there are so many scriptures in the Bible that talk about harvest. And a couple of scriptures I want to just give a call to. It says in Galatians 6, let us not become weary in doing good. At the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Matthew 9:37 and 38 says, then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. 2 Corinthians 9:10, now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. And Matthew 10:23, this is the parable of the sower. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. So God has this lovely idea of harvest. Like, it means a lot to him. And so in turn, it should mean a lot to us as well. And when Marshall had asked me about sharing, I thought about my life, and I really was thinking about how my life relates to this. And there's much evidence in my own life, that I really feel points to how God sown seeds in me from a very young age and how it came to harvest like so many years later. And before we get into today's scripture, I wanted to share with you guys a little bit about my story and where I come from. So I wanted just to show some pictures of my family. This is my dad, as you've seen. This is my mom over here next to me in the side. And these are my two sisters, Takima and Kiana. Those are my lovely sisters. And shout out to my sister who's also watching. She wanted me to shout her out. But I love where I came from. St. Croix, if you've never been to St. Croix, I may be biased, but it's probably one of the most beautiful islands in the entire world. St. Croix is actually here. Oh, you guys can't see it? Oh. It's kind of somewhere in there, It's 13 miles long of a bit of land. So I mean, from East Region to here is already twice as long as St. Croix. But it's literally in this small little square in the Caribbean. And if you can't really see it, this is literally the island I grew up on. That's Puerto Rico, as most of y'all probably recognize, and that's the comparison of St. Croix to Puerto Rico. I remember even talking at our staff retreat a couple days ago. Michelle Santos was asking me about how many people are in the population of St. Croix or in the Virgin Islands. And I said, 100,000 people. And she said, in St. Croix? I said, no, in the entire territory. There's 100,000 people that live in St. Croix. So in how everyone has the idea of everyone knows everybody, everyone knew me growing up in St. Croix. I'm not even joking about it. And growing up as a kid in St. Croix was a really amazing experience. And when I was about 10 years old, my parents had enrolled me in Catholic school. And so this is kind of like the interesting part of where my story kind of started. Like, we grew up in Catholic church. Like, we got baptized when we were infants. I went through First Communion when I was in Catholic school, and I got confirmed later, right before I went into high school. So we did all the steps of like Catholic faith, and we had all of that. And again, I was in Catholic school for 2 years, and it was a very unique experience. I mean, with the uniforms, the traditions that they taught us, and, in a way, I know Catholic school is a way to try to like instill faith, I think, into our younger generation. And a lot of these Christian schools are like that. And I think I always believed in God when I was younger. I'd always grown up knowing that God was real. I knew that he was around, but I never really understood what the concept of pursuing a relationship looked like. Honestly, at that point in my life, I didn't even know that I could pursue a relationship with him. I honestly thought it was about obedience, listen to what you are taught and always doing so, which I didn't always do very well. But I think the interesting thing about it is that at the time I was going through a lot of transition in my life. My dad's mom had just passed away right as we got into Catholic school. That was like the first experience with loss I had. I even got choked up a second just thinking about her. It's 18 years since she passed. And I got pulled out of baseball when I was around that time as well, which I loved. I loved playing baseball with my dad. We would always be on the fields playing, but I got pulled out. And so I really had nothing extracurricular in my life. But the interesting thing about maybe not getting the seed of faith necessarily planted in my life, one of the parts I love about being in Catholic school is that this is where music came into my life. At the ripe age of 10 years old, we had the option to be able to do these classes. You could do art, you could do a special literature class, you could do sports. But for some reason, little Khalid chose music at 10 years old. And I actually wanted to try something with you guys. I wanted to take you guys back about 18 years, and I wanted to take you back to my first music class to basically show you guys what I learned. Y'all want to try it with me? So I basically need this side of the room and this side of the room. I need y'all to just do this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Keep going. Now this middle of the room, do this. Back side of the room, do this. Hey, good job, music class. So that was my experience in sixth grade at 10 years old. They taught us the very basics of understanding rhythm, and all we did was clap. That's all we did for, I think, probably about, for the first 2 weeks of my music class. And I'll never forget my teacher, Miss Thompson. She was the most amazing person to introduce me to music. She basically was talking to my parents. She was like, Mr. and Mrs. James, I want to talk to you. Your son seems to have an aptitude for music, which is funny considering that's all I learned at that point. So that was my aptitude for music at that point. But I remember she was like, I think your son would be really good in learning an instrument. So my parents were like, should we do this? Should we not? That sounds like a lot of noise in my house. No, just kidding. But My parents said yes, and so my parents enrolled me into the after-school music program, and right around that time, my music teacher brought me into class, and she was like, go into the closet and pick an instrument, and so I decided to pick up probably the instrument that looked mostly like me because I was skinny and long, so I picked the trombone. I mean, it literally, like, my entire arm looks like a trombone if it moves like this. But I'm pretty sure at that point in 6th grade, the instrument weighed more than I did. I mean, I was like 60 pounds, like soaking wet. I'm being exaggerating, but yeah. And I was small in this instrument, but I loved it. I literally have this massive brass instrument. My lips are like the whole time. I'm blowing hard. I'm like getting like red in the face. My arms can't even reach, but I was just hooked. Like I was so hooked on it. And about maybe like a month later, after we left, after doing like the music class for about a month, my same Catholic school, I remember, this is all in 6th grade and 10 years old, my school decided to begin a steel band program at our school. So at 10 years old, little Khalid is about this high compared to the drum. So I had to get a milk crate, and they actually had to put a milk crate in front of me so I could step up just so I can play the instrument. But again, I have all of these like physical like things that were like should be debilitating me, but I was just absolutely just hooked. I had just the time of my life learning music, and I played music from 6th grade all the way through high school. Like, I mean, we were in multiple different bands. I had so many abilities to be able to just grow in music in those 2 instruments alone. And I graduated, you know, being in the music program. I was part of the marching band, all of that stuff. I played steel pan for so long. So you're talking about 7 years of music before I left to go to college. And now when I went to go to college, this is where the story gets interesting, if it wasn't interesting already. When I left to go to college, I had already left high school with an architecture license. Yeah. So when we were in high school, we had the chance to study vocational programs. I decided to study architecture, and I was originally going to Valencia, UCF, and then UF to go in my major. Thank God that didn't happen. No, I'm a Knight, not a Gator, just saying. Just throwing it out there for any of the Gators. I'm sorry. I love you, but you know. But I was originally planning to study architecture, and I promise you, like 1 or 2 months into the program, I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable doing the architecture program. I had no music around me. Like, I just stopped music as I went to college. And so I just was, it's like putting somebody in a desert with no water. Like, that's basically like how it happened. That's how I felt. And I remember calling my parents, and I remember I was crying. I was just like, what am I doing? Like, what do I do in my life? And I talked to my parents. I said, you know, I miss music, you know. And my parents were like, okay. You know, if you switch your degree to music, that's fine. You know, go ahead and do it. So, I mean, my 2nd semester, I bought my first trombone, and I enrolled in music class at Valencia College, and it was like a breath of fresh air. I feel like I could breathe. Like, it was such a breath of fresh air in my life, and it definitely gave me, I feel like a reignited passion after so long, or half of a year, really, I would say, without it. But here's the part where the story that I remember really changed my life. Because when I switched to music, the following school year, I had to start music theory. And I actually met a disciple from the Church of Christ at music class. My very first day of music theory at my following school year, I met a brother who was in the ministry as well. He was a disciple in the church here in Orlando. And he and I became friends, I think, within the first 5 minutes. Like, we were sitting outside of class. We hadn't even introduced ourselves in the class yet, but he and I became super good friends, like right away. And we spent the entire year, like just being wild, being silly, being loud, because I was loud, I'm be honest. I still am, but yeah, see, Melanie says I still am loud, so it's just proof of that. But I spent the whole year getting to know this guy, and it was really enjoyable. And then I remember my following year of school, the campus ministry was starting to have Bible talks on campus. That was when they started. And so they invited me out to come to the campus classes, and I was playing Foursquare, and we were just having a ball. And I mean, then they invited me out to Bible talks. And again, so this is in August of 2013. And then about 3 months later, after studying the Bible, coming out to church, and just being engaged with the relationships, on November 13th, 2013, is when I got baptized, and is when I became a member of the Church of Christ. And if the date If the date looks familiar, it's because today, 9 years ago, exactly 9 years ago today, was when I got baptized into Christ. So today feels like it's a surreal feeling getting to speak like on the day of my baptism. And my experience going through the Church of Christ after that was one of a lot of amazing experiences and recollections. And I became part of the campus ministry, and I even got the opportunity to continue playing music, where I was able to play at so many of the stuff that we've had for our church. I was able to play pan for our Soul Jam festival that we had last year, which is an amazing thing. I got to play trombone at FDC back in 2015. I still love to play trombone and pan because Conan told me I can't come back next week unless I bring my steel pan and my trombone. So somehow I'm going to try and play both. I don't know how I'm going to, I have to play both somehow. But I got the opportunity to continue playing music in the church here in Orlando, and it was an amazing journey getting to grow and getting to experience just all of the different things that music brought back to my life as a result of deciding to make that choice. And then about 2 years ago, then Marshall, had the bright idea saying, hey, Khalid, how would you like to join ministry? And I'm like, okay. Took a deep breath, and I was like, this is going to be rough. No, I'm kidding. I was really excited at the idea of joining ministry, but I think the amazing thing about just where my story, for me, where I really enjoyed what it meant is that my story basically transitioned so much because of music. And I'm thinking back to the early days of when I got baptized, and even when I got into Catholic school. I never would have imagined that 20 years ago that this is where I would be standing, like here, speaking to you guys. But I don't tell you guys all of this mostly because I want you guys to listen to just my story and just to know, all of these, details about Khalid. I really want you guys to really see that God is the hero in my story. Like, there was so much that he orchestrated from my life from 20 years ago to where I wouldn't believe that I'm here today. And I really want to even just start to turn into our scripture for today. What we're going to be reading is from Acts 17, and I kind of want to set up the scene a little bit. This is Paul. He's talking in the Areopagus, which is basically like the social media center of Athens. So if that was today, I would be like, did you see Jesus' story on Instagram? It's like, no, I saw his Be Real though. That's basically they go to the Areopagus to be able to hear new news. They want to hear what's new, what's the most current teaching, what is the new, basically, in Athens at that time. So Paul is teaching to these people, and he's there talking about, who Jesus is and talking about who God is. So we're going to be starting in Acts 17, verse 22. Just read along with me. I have it on the screen as well. It says, Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, people of Athens, I see it in every way you are religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, as this is what I'm going to proclaim for you. I want to stop right there for a second. I really want to highlight this. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. This was me. This was me. I knew God, I knew of God for most of my life. I said, yes, Lord. I said all the prayers. I did communion with my family when we were in church and all of that. But this was me. I just said, yes, God, without even really understanding who this God was that I was worshiping. I was really ignorant of the one that I worship. And this is what Paul is trying to highlight to the people in Athens. It's like, you have all of these gods, and you even have an unknown God. Who are you worshiping? Like, who are you actually, giving your praise to? And I never took the time to learn about it. He's always been present in my life. But again, I never took this time to understand who God is. And I want to keep reading as we continue with this. It says, in verse 24, it says, the God who made the world and everything, this is Paul telling them who God is, the God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he gave himself and everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man, he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. And this is the part that I want to harp on for a little bit, because this little part, and actually changed it up a little bit, and he marked out the appointed times in his story. Not just history, but God marked out times for where people were going to be placed throughout the entire span of his story. From the time of creation, from Adam to very right now, November 13, 2022, God has had every single day laid out in front of him. And he knew that every single one of us who are in this room, that we would be here. He already knew every single person, every single soul, every single heart that is in this room. We didn't even know all of us would be in here today. One of the biggest things that brought us in here today was food. We knew we were going to be eaten. But God knew that all of us were going to be in here today, worshiping together and being able to share in his fellowship today. And this is the part that boggles my mind. Back in 2004, again, this was little Khalid, 10 years old, got this little seed of music planted in him, not knowing where music was going to take me. And yet 18 years later, music brought me from not just from living on St. Croix to living in Orlando to being met by the brothers and sisters from this very fellowship, to getting baptized, to now working in the ministry, to now serving with music in the church. There is absolutely no way I could have guessed that that's what, but God knew. This is the part that I'm talking about with harvest, is that God planted this seed in my life at that point because he knew that 18 years later, I would be standing right here. The very words that are coming out of my mouth, he already had ordained for me to be able to speak to you today. And again, it continued to strike me because I can't guess. I could never have guessed that this is where my life would go. And I want everyone to be able to kind of start to consider that all of the times that we have in this fellowship in Christ have all been laid out by God in his story. Not our story, not my story, not Bill's story, not Marshall's story. This is God's story happening. Every single day that we have is a page in God's story that is continuing to unravel itself. And as we continue to read, I want to finish with this, is that the more that I understand that this is his story, the more that I can let go of all the things that I want to happen from my own life. To let go of the control that I wanted to have in my own life, to figure that I wanted to go and study architecture. God's like, nope. Right back to music. He knew, and he knew that it was something that was in me that I would love to share with people. And why does he do this? Why does he mark out these points in time, and why does he change the plans that we may have put in our own lives? And and Paul answers this as he closes out this passage in Acts 17. He says, God did this so that they, and I even put in parentheses, we. God did this so that we would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. That is the reason why he did it, so that there was a possibility, a chance, 1 in a million chance, like playing in the lottery in Vegas. Just imagine there's this one possibility that we would reach out for him, that we would seek him, that we would love him in the way that he loved us. He did this so that we would have a chance to do this. That's the part that boggles my mind. He already knew the entire story, but he still decided to take a chance. He still chose to take a chance on us. And I tell you why, even more so. If you think about what music is, in the essence of humanity, and all of humanity for how long we've been on this earth, music is not essential for human survival. If you think about it, we could walk into service, listen to the word of God, and go home. We could literally just do that. That's all we would need. We wouldn't need more than that. But God literally put this thing in my life that was just non-essential to my survival. I could have gone my entire life without ever playing an instrument, without ever playing keys or guitar or drums or steel pan or trombone. I could have gone my entire life without it. But it is proof to me that God exists. Because this thing that is non-essential for my life, he decided to put in me with a fiery passion, that it goes beyond just playing the instruments and just singing the right notes. It's something that really stirs my emotions. It's something that really lets me have a spiritual reflection with him. It's one of the few things in life that does that. But that is proof that he exists, because we don't need it, yet he decided to give it to us. Yet he gave it to me. And the reason why I say this is because this small seed that God gave me in my life, well, almost 20 years ago, is something that he knew would be able to bring glory to his kingdom and would not be something that I would only be using just from my own personal gain. And I'm telling you, the seeds that God will scatter in your life, they may look like very ordinary things. It may be some kind of sport. It may be something, maybe just that you like enjoy, like a hobby. It could be something simple in your life. But any one of those things can be seeds that God can scatter in your life to bring a harvest to be able to bring glory to his kingdom. So I really want to encourage you guys, if you've been visiting today for the first time with our fall festival, or if you've been a member of this church for over 50 years, like the Boyles, like there are seeds that God can scatter in your life from hearing the word that can transform and change your life forever. And again, he will make them grow in his time, not according to our time. He will make them grow in his time, and they will bring glory in the way that they want. So 20 years ago, I never would have imagined this little boy with all of them big front teeth. I never imagined that 20 years ago that this little boy would be able to have just all of the experiences of being able to be a part of this fellowship. I never imagined that I will be able to become a director of worship for a church. I never imagined that I would be a worship director for Teen Camp. I even got the chance to play at the World Discipleship Summit and lead the singles track for WDS. 9 years ago, that did not seem like a reality. If you literally went and talked to Khalid in 2004, I never would have believed you. I would have told you you're a liar. I would have told you that I don't believe this would happen. But that is the seed that God can use in our life to bring harvest to his kingdom. And I really want to encourage you guys today, as you're reflecting on the harvest and as you're consuming the food, let it be just a testament of the amazing thing that God has done in our life. And let those seeds, let them be watered. If you are not even sure what seeds are planted in your life, we want to help you. If you've not known what it is to be in a relationship with Christ, we want to help pour Spirit water on you. But remember that we are not the reason that you will grow. God is the reason that you will grow. Those seeds that can be planted in your life will grow according to God's own time. And as we reflect for communion, I really want us to be able to just take some time and just thank Christ for the amazing watering of just being able to pour himself over onto us, to be able to help us have this reconnection with God, to be able to see that his harvest is good and his seeds will come in his own time. I'm going to invite the worship team to come up as I pray.